I think John the Baptist would have been a hacker. Just in my mind, that's what I pictured. And then you see Paul. Paul was a very educated man, very eloquent man. Paul could have been a pretty wealthy man by his background and things of that nature. He could have achieved those things. God called him away from most of those things except his eloquence and education, because Paul sure had a way with words and sure had a way of reaching people. And Paul was a guy who could speak on the spot and had great knowledge about the beliefs of the people around the area. And God used him to reach Rome. God had a plan for his life, and God had a plan for John the Baptist. God had a plan for Peter and for James, for all of them, and had an audience for them to go to. And I don't think that God is doing anything any differently today, because the Lord said this. He said, I'm God, I change not. Hebrews 13:8 tells us Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. So as I look around our church and I look around on Sunday mornings, I look around on Sunday evenings, and I see different crowds. Actually, I see less of the crowd on Sunday night than I see on Sunday mornings. But as far as that goes, as I look around, I see opportunities, because we all represent a place of ministry. There are people that you and I are specifically and specially geared to go reach, to go teach, to go befriend, to go love and embrace and lead to Christ. And I can't go the places that you would go. For instance, if you look back there toward the nearest to the back of the church, you're going to see a row of people that are sitting there that I cannot go where they'll be tomorrow. If I walk into St. Clair School or Rogersville City School, and I walk into a classroom full of children and I sit down among them and try to befriend them or talk to them, I'll probably get arrested. I'll definitely get questioned. Why am I there? What am I doing? But that's a place where you go every Monday on a mission, because God called you to go and tell people about Him. Every Monday, these children have a mission field. I wish, guys, I want you to hear this. I wish someone would have told me what I'm telling you right now. And they may have, and I probably just didn't listen. They weren't the preacher that said, I hope you'll listen. They just said it and went on. But I hope you'll listen. Nobody told me that whenever I was 51 that I would be accountable for the things I said to the people when I was 15, the people that I spent that time around, or the people when I was 9 or 10 when I knew the Lord. No, I didn't know the Lord until I was 12, but at 12 years old, God anticipated and expected me to be just as much of a witness as He does today. God never called me to be a greater witness than anyone here. God called me to a specific task in that witness, but we're all called to be a witness. Some of you, you are retired now, and you've got some time to maybe do some things around your place that maybe you weren't doing before, and you say, well, I don't have any time now. You might say that too, but you have opportunities that I don't have, because I have an obligation through the day to rural health. And so I spend my days there until 5, and sometimes much later than 5, depending on what the day calls for. There are going to be people in your path and in your community, in your neighborhood, that you're called to reach. You're sent on mission to reach. Rural health is my mission field. God has put me there to be a witness, to be a help, to be an encourager and a blessing, to be a light, to lead people to Christ. When He's through with that mission there, He may send me somewhere else. He's done that to me several times, and times when you think, what could go wrong? You're in a good job. You do the best job you can. You're not doing anything wrong that somebody should come in and say otherwise, and then the economy will trickle off, or something else will happen unexpected, and they say, we've got to lay you off. then God would move me somewhere else. But I have no doubt that everywhere He's put me or everywhere He's placed me, He's placed me to be a light. I haven't always done the best job of that. I've felt Him a lot in that. But that does not negate the reason He put me there. And a lot of times, if I've not done a good job, instead of taking me out, He just has to humble me to remind me why I'm there, what my purpose is, wherever I go, to be a witness. Now, saying that to say this, Paul realized what his task was. Paul realized he needed to tell people about Jesus, and he took it so seriously that he didn't see a place to quit. There were things that were so important, they demanded to be told, they demanded to be said, and Paul wasn't looking for the right time to say them. He was using the time he had to proclaim the gospel and to teach and to disciple these people that were listening. Paul knew the next day he was leaving. And so Paul, the Bible said he was preaching, said he is long-winded. Now the Bible calls him long-winded at midnight. But he's going to preach all night long till the daytime. But the Bible said at midnight he was long-winded. He had preached a long time, and he continued to preach, and not saying anything bad about Eutychus, this young man that fell out the window, but just saying that physically people get tired, and emotionally people get tired, and spiritually sometimes we get tired, and that doesn't change the fact that there is something more important than how you feel that needs to get across to the people you love. There's something more important than what you've got going on tomorrow or next week or down the road that right now it should demand a full house's attention. And because of the priority that we place on things, we can come to church on Sunday nights and not see as big a crowd as we would see on Sunday morning. It's about priority. Remember this morning I said it's about our participation. We all have the tools, we all have the knowledge, we all have the need. Not many of us participate. Not many of us want to be out there. A lot of us are like the girl on the cartoon and playing volleyball. I remember, I don't even know what the show was, but this girl was on a volleyball court, and it's the way it would come on is how I remember the scenario, but she was just there, she's just there, just lackadaisical, just kind of hanging out, and she'd be standing there, and the volleyball would go by her head, and when the volleyball was going by her head, you'd see her hand go, but the volleyball was already gone. She was on the floor, but she wasn't in the game. And a lot of people are that way at church. They're on the floor, they're wearing the uniform, but their head's not in the game, and they're not accomplishing anything. They're not contributing to anything. And it doesn't make a difference if we sit on a pew in that manner, if we don't bother coming, if we're not participating, if we're not involved, we're not making much of a difference. But the Bible tells us that Paul was at this place knowing that he was getting ready to leave. So he needed to give everything he had. And so he did. So we see Paul's mindset and what Paul was doing. And then we see Eutychus. And I hate to pick on him. I mean, for Paul's sake, he fell out the window and died. But, I hate to pick on him, but there's a lot of people that are in church that are not much different spiritually than Eutychus is. They've come to church and they found a pretty nice seat. I think he had the best seat in the house because he was sitting in the window and probably felt the breeze and that night air, and that helped lull him to sleep. He could see the stars twinkling and hear the crickets chirping and all those other things that were soothing and relaxing to him. And his mind was someplace else. It definitely wasn't on what he needed or what he was a part of there in that service. And Paul, who felt the need that this is the most important thing I can do, I've really got to get this message out. Paul was doing his part, but Eutychus wasn't receiving anything. And, there again, it was midnight. He was tired. I get it. But, there are a lot of people who sit in church, and it's later than they think. It's much later than they think. The world is changing very quickly, and things are happening that would lead us to believe and to know that we don't have much longer. Certainly Christ is returning, and it might even be in my lifetime, and if not in mine, then definitely in these children's lifetime they'll see Christ's return, and I believe that. I expect that. I anticipate that, and even today it crossed my mind after church, and I thought, I'm okay with it. I'm okay if he decides to come back. He owes us nothing. But there are people in church that they've fallen asleep. There again, they get a participation award. They're here. And they'll be here next Sunday. And they're going to hear some of the most important things, and we're going to hear some of the most important things that we've heard to this point. But is it going to shake us at all? Is it going to stir us at all? Are we even going to remember it? I don't think Eutychus remembered one part of Paul's message. No, he was blessed, and he was an instrument that God used definitely to encourage the rest of the church. But up to the point that he fell out the window, how much do you think he could have repeated back to you? And I can tell you this, if you can't repeat it, you can't live it. If you can't rehearse it, it's not going to have an impact on the people around you. Eutychus came to church looking to leave, looking to do something else, looking to go home and go to bed probably. He come to church already with the end in mind. Paul come to church to make sure they knew what it was that was coming and that they would be prepared for that. They both came to church. They both were there till midnight. But only one of them was spiritually asleep. And I want you to understand this about being spiritually asleep. In the church, like I said, this is something church in AM service definitely needs to hear. We need to understand this. And if you look in Revelation, you'll see where the Bible talks about the lukewarm church. The lukewarm church is a comfortable church. And God said, I'd rather you were hot. I'd rather you'd be on fire for me, or I'd rather you'd be cold and just not care. But because you're lukewarm, you're somewhere in the middle, he said, I'll just spew you out of my mouth. And what a lukewarm church does is a lukewarm church gets comfortable. And if you're going to fall asleep, you probably need to get comfortable. Now, some people can fall asleep anywhere, whether they're comfortable or not. I remember I worked, was it third shift? I was working third shift. I don't know for sure if I even worked third shift at that time or not, but we had hardwood put down in our house. And these people come in and they bring all this wood in, and they bring all these hammers, and they bring these air guns and these air compressors, and they're in our house and they're putting down hardwood. I walked right in the middle of where they were, and I sat down in a chair and I laid sideways and I went to sleep. 3 hours or 4 hours later, I wake up and they're already back in the hallway working. And the guy looked up and saw me lift my head. He said, I've never seen nothing like that before in my life, as they continued to hammer and beat and bang around. Some of us don't need to be comfortable. It's just time to go to sleep, and we will. My father-in-law fell asleep while he's in the military on the rifle range. Sleep sometimes doesn't escape us, but there's definitely an appropriate time and place for it, and church isn't it. Spiritually speaking, definitely church isn't the place we come to rest. That's the difference in mindset, though. A lot of people think the church is here to meet my needs and to help me feel better about me. And if I can relax and I can lay all my problems down, not have to worry about them, that's so much better for me. But God didn't call us to rest and relaxation. He called us to action. The Bible talks about raising that mighty army up in the valley of dry bones, and it said he raised a mighty army. He didn't raise a resort or a retreat. The thing about Revelation, where it talks about lukewarm, when someone's lukewarm, they get comfortable and they can fall asleep. The problem with being spiritually asleep is when you're spiritually asleep and you're like this young man Eutychus. The Bible talks about how whenever he was alive, when they got him alive, it talks about how they ate, how they enjoyed that time together and ate and spent that time together. But you aren't eating if you're asleep. You're not doing anything if you're asleep. And what sleep leads to spiritually is death. We dry up. We dry out, and we die. We get to a place where we don't feel, where we don't experience, or we don't know the joy or the presence of the Lord. Now, if we're asleep, we can sometimes be stirred. But don't you know, don't we all know that one person that it just seems like that God just doesn't get through? They're not listening anymore. They don't care anymore. There's no conviction anymore. There's no worry anymore. There's not a thought of God or His work or His care for others. Now, there's hope for people who are spiritually dead. We've got some spiritually dead family around us. I wouldn't call anyone in our church. I wouldn't think anyone. I sure hope no one in our church is just spiritually wasted and has nothing and no feeling and no thought of loving the Lord. But we know some families that are close to our church that they have no regard about coming to church. They have no regard about having a relationship with God. They have no regard with the choices they make and how it pleases or displeases the Lord. We all could probably think of one or two. So when this man Eutychus fell out the window, the church didn't go, man, that's too bad. When this man Eutychus fell out the window, the church didn't say, well, we'll pray for him, maybe he'll come back. When this man fell out of church, the church went and got him. But notice this. Paul didn't stop preaching. Paul didn't stop teaching. Paul didn't change one thing he did, because the problem wasn't the preaching, it wasn't the teaching, it wasn't anything else. The problem was with the young man in the window who was almost out of church at the start of the service. And so we've got to keep teaching, we've got to keep preaching, we've got to keep reaching. But when they fall out, we go to where they are and take it to them. The Bible said he went and he laid down on this young man and prayed with him. And the Bible said he told me, he said his life's still in him. I believe this: once you're saved, you're always saved. You might fall out of church, you might backslide, you might turn away. But I believe if you're the Lord's child, the Bible says He'll convict you, He'll burden you, He'll work on you. The thing about it is, if you can do all those things, those horrible, horrible things, and God never deal with you, God never work on you, God never bother you, your problem is you were never saved in the first place, because whom the Lord loves, He chastens. If He doesn't chasten you, you're not His son. That is biblical. It's what the Bible says. If our sin could cover the blood, we would be in trouble. But the Bible said where sin did abound, grace did much more abound. This man falls out the window because he is halfway out of church before he ever got there. Paul goes out and he loves him and he retrieves him and he takes him up. And the Bible said at that time they celebrate and they eat. And I think there's not enough celebration when people get saved. I think we ought to form a party around them. We ought to form a welcoming society to people who come to know the Lord, and reach out and embrace them and encourage them and invite them to eat with us after church. Get to know them and spend time with them. That's biblical. It really is. A young man that got saved and come and got baptized. I'm thankful he's in church. A young man, Rodney, that had gotten saved and shared his testimony. He's going to church with his sister and her family, and I'm glad he is. They really came after him, embraced him once he was in church, and they pursued him, and they're spending lots of time with him in that fellowship. And I saw him at the gas station the other day, and he come up and told me how he loved me, and he talks to me, asks me questions about the Lord when he does see me. There's been a change, and I see this change in his life, and I'm thankful for it. There are a lot of people who get saved, they'll get baptized, and in a little while they disappear. No, I know where he is, and I'm okay. I'm glad he's with people who are encouraging and loving him, and I want to see that. I want to see him grow in that. But there's some people that, where are they? And the problem is, some of them we don't know their names to even reach out to them. We can't remember them. Some of them, they just didn't come back. We didn't pursue them. We didn't go after them. I believe that they will stand before the Lord one day, and they'll give an answer to what they did with what he gave to them. But I believe we'll stand before the Lord one day, and we'll give an answer for what we did for them when he moved in their life. Church went out and they received this man. They eat, they celebrate. Paul keeps preaching. The message keeps going. He sees the important, and he continues in that. He doesn't lose focus. He doesn't do something fancy to try to keep this guy awake. The message is the message. It is what it is, and sometimes it's powerful and it's overwhelming and it moves, and we see that and we feel that and experience that, but we don't have to touch up what God is doing. The Bible said it'll accomplish what he sends it out to do. I don't think we should be sticks in the mud. And I tell preachers, I've had a lot of young preachers and other preachers ask me, say, what would you recommend, or what should I do as a preacher? Do you have any advice for me? And this is my advice to anybody, anywhere. If you teach, if you testify, if you preach, whatever it is God gives you to do, if it doesn't move you, probably not going to move anybody else. If it doesn't touch or bless your heart, you can recite a speech if you want to, but God works with the heart. So study and pray and find those things that move in you and share those things with the people around you. But we don't have to touch up or dress up what God says to do. I've got a bookshelf full of books in here, and I've got a bunch at home, and I'll pick them up and I'll read through them sometimes. And you know what bothers me is I've got a lot of books written for pastors or preachers or written for churches or written for Christians. They don't mention much scripture at all. What they're full of quotes by famous sports people or famous other people, or they're full of history about things and certain moments in time that happen. And not that they're bad things. They might be entertaining or even encouraging moments, but I'm not here to encourage. I'm here to evangelize. We're not here to prep up people with fluffy talk. We're here to lead them to Christ and to make disciples and get them ready for the hard times and get them ready to receive the good times. But either way, they need to receive it in faith through Christ. That's why we're here. And so Paul focused still on the message. But the Bible said that when Paul left at that point, there was a lot of rejoicing. It said that it wasn't a small matter that Eutychus was alive. You know, as I think of that, and I think if that church was of the custom of meeting at midnight or staying that late anyhow, Eutychus was always going to fall out somewhere. But if it hadn't been for the gospel, and it hadn't been for the pursuit of the church and the conviction of Paul, they would have had no reason to celebrate when he had left. It was the action based on what they'd heard and seen. It was the reception of bringing this young man back. I don't think anybody sat around and reminded him every week or two. You remember that time you fell out the window? Although nobody ever forgot. But it would have been hard for him to come back if that was the only conversation anybody ever had. We got a lot to do, and we got a lot of opportunity to do it. It's about participation. I'm going to ask that you stand.